So first, let me talk a little bit more about me. You introduced the Dutch Techcentre for Life Sciences already. I'm working at the moment mainly for another organization, an independent foundation called HealthRI, which is a collaboration between the academic hospitals in the Netherlands and other organizations. Recently, actually, the 1st of January, formally, HealthRI and DTL merged into one organization. So DTL is now a part of the HealthRI organization. And HealthRI has received money from the government, the Dutch government, under the growth fund to actually make data reusable in health research, for health research. And my third affiliation is with Elixir Netherlands. I'm the technical coordinator of Elixir Netherlands. Elixir is the infrastructure for life science data in Europe, much broader than only health there. And I am the technical coordinator, which means that I'm trying to see what is all happening in the Netherlands for this European infrastructure. So we already heard that it is a burden to make data fair. It is a burden that is actually pushed by society upon researchers to do something with the data. And this burden comes from different places. I see burdens that are coming from institutes, and actually this is an international burden. This happened internationally, but it is something that originated largely, unfortunately, in the Netherlands, with fake data being used in research, being made up by researchers, and institutes actually burden all researchers now to prove that they have actually reproducible research. And this has implications for the way we are treating the data. And funders, they actually, often we hear, we want you to make the data open, but what funders actually want is that their investment is the most valuable that they can do. And sometimes that means that results are patentable and things need to be staying closed. But in most cases, indeed, scientific data needs to become open to maximize societal value for the data and the investment that comes from the funders. And so this is a burden. The burden, in other words, make your data fair and perform proper data stewardship. Now, summarizing that, you have to perform fair data stewardship. This is a combination of the two. You can actually do fair as part of data stewardship, and this is already also what was introduced. Now, I'm not going to read through the 15 FAIR principles because I assume that you are familiar, at least at some level, with these. But what I often see is that people actually don't know where to start. And we already had an excellent introduction to that. So what do you do to start? And the first thing you want to do is make sure that the data end up in a repository, or in general, in a place where you would look for this data if you knew that somebody else would have been collecting it. So that's not on an obscure website. That's probably not on the Maastricht University repository, but it is probably somewhere international where other people also put similar data. And then indeed, you need to make sure that it's findable there in the future. So that's giving it an identifier, but also making sure, and this is part of the accessibility, that it's still there in 10 years. So maintain it well. And also, and this is important for machine interoperability, machine actionability, tell people under what conditions they can use it. Already and publish those. So those are accessibility. Interoperability, choose your standards. Choose, not build. And use a standard, but for everything there are standards. So please select one and not make one up, because you're going to get yourself into trouble later if you need to map it. And then for reusability, I actually summarize it mostly as don't throw away any metadata. Just keep what you have. So those are the starting points. Now, how do you continue from there? That's more difficult. But that's the fair. That was the first half of fair data stewardship. So the second half is actually, I'm giving here the definition that we made in DTL for data stewardship. And it contains two important parts. So you see first at the end that the goal of data stewardship is reusability and reproducibility. That's exactly what we needed to do for our funders and for our institute. But I did something here already. I colored reusability in two colors and also highlighted usability, because you can actually do usability as part of reusability as well. And the key to that is that actually data stewardship starts before the project starts. So it's also part of execution, but also part of the planning of the data manager. So, and we heard it before, if you do verification of your data at the end of the project, you don't have any benefit from it yourself. But if you do it at the beginning as part of fair data stewardship, then you actually benefit from it in your own project. Indeed, by being able to link to other people's data from outside, by having the best procedures in place and thinking about your file naming systems and folders beforehand and sharing them between the different people that are working in a project really helps. You don't have to chase for each other's files. So if you do it as part of the planning, it benefits yourself. It's no longer a burden. So a new summary is perform fair data stewardship planning. We need to do it, the planning already before the project starts. Now, there is one more key thing in here. I am not saying that you need to make a data management plan. I say you need to do data management planning. And I really make that distinction. And that distinction comes actually from warfare. There are different nice generals who have made statements about planning in warfare. And this is one from Eisenhower that's actually even more positive than Helmut von Moltke. He really said, as soon as you touch the enemy, your plan is worthless. And I think indeed the plan is worthless. But what Eisenhower says here is the planning is still valuable. So what you need to do in science as well is continuously update your plan. Keep planning even during your project until the end. So a research project, of course, is not like going to war, but still the comparison is quite useful. And if you're doing your data management planning during the whole process of the research project, and you keep adjusting it to the situations you encounter on the battlefield, at the end, the data management plan that you could create is a log of what you did, and it's actually part of the documentation of your data. So, how do people do data management planning? Actually, they don't. Traditionally, what you see right now is that people are not doing data management planning, they're making data management plans. And the tools for that look a little bit like a Google form. So the Google form shows the questions that the funder is asking, and it gives you the option to answer them. And what makes these tools for data management planning, or for making a data management plan more advanced, is that they actually contain guidance. And the guidance contains hints on what you should think about when creating the answer, and what you should include in your answer. Okay, so if you're planning the financial aspects, how much does the storage cost? That needs to be included in that answer. But it's a lot of work. You still need to write sentences to actually answer these things. There is a second issue, and that is that all of these tools, they expect you to find the solutions from a list. So it gives you the hint. You need to pay attention to where you store your data, and then you go to the university service list and you find that there are 3 ways of doing storage. So how to choose between them? There is no identification. So you need expertise for that. I have identified 3 different kinds of expertise needs that you could have. The first one is if you already know that a service exists and you know what it does, you just don't know it, you don't remember where it is. There, a list is very useful. So that's the type of question that you have is, okay, where did I find that again? So you go to the list services and you find it again. That's just solving the irritants problem of not knowing, not remembering where it is. But there are 2 other classes of problem. There's the painful problem, where you say, hey, did somebody already encounter that problem and make a generic solution that I can use? I didn't know that. If you didn't know that somebody else solved the problem, you're not even going to look on the list. You're just going to write in your project proposal that you're going to do it yourself. Waste of time. And that's only the second class. The third class of problems is what I call the dangerous problems, which is you can't even plan for it. You don't even know you will encounter the problem. You're just halfway your project and you come to a certain situation with your data where you say, this doesn't work. And then somebody else says, oh, you didn't know that? The IT department has a service to solve this problem. That's the dangerous problem. And 2 and 3 are not being solved by lists and are not being solved by you being pointed to those lists using guidance in a plan, in a tool to make a data management plan. So what is the solution? I propose the solution Data Stewardship Wizard. And in the Netherlands, there is this advertisement for a toilet cleaning product, and it's called WC Eend. And then they say, wij van WC Eend, we creating WC Eend, find that you should use WC Eend. So I'm creating the Data Stewardship Wizard, think that you should use the Data Stewardship Wizard to do this. So Data Stewardship Wizard actually is there to turn the burden into a benefit and to indeed make data management planning process easier, not the plan. Although it can make a plan, and I'll show you. And we're trying to actually solve this problem, the dangerous and all of the 3 levels of problems. So this is a younger me in front of what has become the Data Stewardship Wizard. So I started collecting information about choices that you can make in data stewardship in 2012. When I started thinking about that together with the people from Zon & W, the funders in the Netherlands for health research. They had a team, a wide team of experts from all kinds of different fields, from insurance companies, people who have something with data, and they talked together about what we should do in the Netherlands. Because in other countries, like in the US and in the UK, they were already talking about data management plans. So at that point, talking with all these people who knew a lot more about data management planning in projects, I started collecting all this information. I started collecting information also by talking to people and by attending conferences. And in the end, that became the largest mind map that I made. In this page that I show here, it had about 600 entries. But it, of course, although a lot of knowledge is in here, and people looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, that's really useful," and my knowledge is indeed encoded in here. But wow, there is so much else that I hadn't considered. This is, of course, not useful to make data management planning practice. And then I came into contact with people in Prague who have since been turning this into what we call the Data Stewardship Wizard. And of course, the content also has changed. Now, I'll first show you how the Data Stewardship Wizard is being used, how it can be used, and how it's useful to a researcher for data management planning. And then I'll have a few slides on how institutional data stewards can actually help it adapt it to the local situation and use it for other purposes, adapt it to the local situation. So this is the screen, and I'll zoom into many different aspects of what you're seeing here, so you don't have to actually squint to see it. This is how Data Stewardship Wizard looks in the middle of a planning process. And I'll show you how it is different from those tools that are just lightening the burden of making a DMP to changing it really into turning it into a benefit to the project and have useful data management planning in your project. So the first thing is this. So that's the phase. The phase of the project, standard, it has 3 phases. Before you're actually submitting a research proposal to the funder, you can already start thinking about what data you will have. And actually, the funder often asks you to have some information in the project proposal. And in this phase, Data Stewardship Wizard can already help you and guide you to take some decisions. But that's not the only thing. Afterwards, you can, as the first phase in a project, continue working on the data management plan. And for instance, in Horizon Europe, you're supposed to submit a data management plan to the funder after the beginning of the project. Then it will help you further. And at the end of the project, you can still fill in other things. So there are 3 different phases, and in each phase, it helps you with different kinds of guidance. That's the first thing. The second is chapters. These chapters keep together the decisions that are relevant to the phases of the data lifecycle, also already noted in the introduction. So the whole data lifecycle, there are many different versions, but I'm using the UK library version of the data lifecycle that a lot of organizations started using to cluster together different types of questions. In this, you also see, dependent on which phase you're in, how many questions you are supposed to be answering in this phase. So this is a live update. When you're answering a question, these numbers change. Then this is an actual question. So let's zoom into that actual question. First, the color in which the question is given is indicating whether it is necessary to answer. So if it's green, it actually is already answered. If it's red, you're supposed to answer it in this phase of your project, but it isn't yet. And if it's gray, it'll come later. It's not an obligatory question. It's just something that could add value to you, but it's not really necessary to answer yet. So that's the color. Then just below the question itself, you see tags. And these tags are indicating, in this case, in which data management plan type, if you turn it into a data management plan, it will be used. So in this case, and I'm supposed to just not show you this one because that was a bug when this screenshot was made, but this question is actually being used by a data management plan for Horizon 2000, but also for Horizon Europe, also for Science Europe, and it is also used in a machine actionable data management plan. So independent of which kind of data management plan you're making, this question, the answer to this question will be used. Then the next thing here is the phase, actually. It is indicated. So this question should be answered before you submit the proposal. And then there are external links. So these are extra guidance for the question. These are web links. And this is actually a link to a page in the book by Professor Barend Mons on data stewardship for science. And there are some do's and don'ts for that. I'll show you a page a little later. Now, this is the answer section then. And as you see, that's not a text field. So you're not, for the questions in the Data Stewardship Wizard, you're not typing a lot of things with a lot of guidance. No, actually, it is here is just a simple yes, no answer. And and that's for 90% or 95% of all the questions. That's the case. So it's rarely that you actually have to type an answer, and certainly even more rare that you have to type a whole sentence or a whole paragraph. So what makes the biggest distinction to any other tool is the fact that this mind map that I showed is hierarchical. And that is encoded here. So you see that here the answer yes was selected. And next to the answer yes, there's this little icon. And this means that if you select this answer, more questions will come up. And it's supposed to be an expert system, this thing. So if you would go to an expert data steward in the institute and ask that person to help you with the data management planning process, that person will not just sit there as a robot and ask you the same questions every time. No, based on what you answer, whether you answer yes or no here, you get different questions back, just like from a human expert. And that's the way the knowledge is encoded in here. No, you don't get irrelevant questions. This whole tree of questions is made such that you only get the questions that you need and that are relevant for your project. And yeah, you see only the questions that are there for your project, but you also get more questions that are relevant for your project than the incredibly shrinking data management plan from the funders, where they're really trying to remove as many questions as possible. So this is a page from the book Data Stewardship for Open Science from Baron Mons, and CRC Press has allowed us to link to the content of that book from our instance of the Data Stewardship Wizard that we host ourselves. So it's just this link is under a lot of questions, and it tells you the things that you should and shouldn't do in this for this specific thing. So it helps you further along. Now, there are a few other kinds of questions, and they're also supposed to help you further rather than just having to type. This is a so-called list question. So if you look at the question from a funder, it could have something like, please describe the data that you are reusing from other places. And then maybe there are 5 data sets from 3 different places with all kinds of different licenses and versioning systems that you have to consider how to use. And then you have to write this whole page of information. And yeah, the guidance says include this, include that, include this. And you have to do that for every data set that you're reusing. So what this does is it shows you a gray box for each data set. You can just add more of these boxes for each data set. And you name each of the data sets, and it repeats all the questions. Or it repeats the hierarchy of the question. Again, if some question is relevant for a data set, it will be part of the tree of questions that grows. And the questions that are irrelevant for the data set will never come up. But in principle, questions are being repeated automatically. So that's a list question. And then the next kind of question here is what we call an integration question. And there you can start typing the answer, but actually what the system does in the background is it looks it up in a resource somewhere else. So for instance here, if you need to type a database that you are using, then there is a resource that is being maintained in Elixir called Fair Sharing, where all databases and all standards are being listed. So if you start typing the name of a standard or the name of a database, it actually looks it up. It tells you, is it this one that you mean? And then it maintains a persistent identifier of that database or standard and adds that also to the so in this case, that's a DOI. Other databases may use other systems for persistent identifiers, but the link is in there. And this makes it possible, again, to afterwards use the data management plan from a machine. Make it the data management plan itself machine actionable, because it can be understood. It's not just strings. The last thing here, very small in the bottom, it says in red interoperability. I didn't have a better screenshot, but this is an indication that this answer, no, for this question actually is not very good for the interoperability. And when relevant, questions will show those things for the FAIR principles, so findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. It will also show it for the openness of the data in the end, and for best practice in data management. So 6 different kinds. And this is not, so it's not an exam, because it actually lists you whether it's green, yellow, or red, at the age of the answer. If you really start your data management planning early, then you still have the choice. You can have it guide your choice just by saying, okay, if I do it this way, I will end up with more fair data without you having to be an expert in the fair principles. So you don't have to make a data management plan alone. You don't have to do the data management planning alone. You can share it like you share creating a Google Doc or a SharePoint document. You just select your coworkers and give them rights to access the planning system. You can give them comment or edit rights, and actually there some other aspect starts making sense. I didn't talk about these little icons here. So with plus, you can add a question to your to-do list for your own memory. And with these text bubbles that are next to each question, you can actually have a comment thread to communicate between the different people who are working on the data management planning. Now, and then at the end, there are other outputs. So after the input phase, this system also has output. So we had the questionnaire in the top. Now we are looking at the metrics. So this is the result of the 6 metrics. It will show you how fair your data will become. And there, I think this is the only tool that can do a prediction of fairness, actually, because not all of the data is already there before you start your project. And this will actually predict how fair the data will become if you follow your own planning. And follow that over time, of course, based on how many of the green and the red answers you gave in the questionnaire. That can be found out. And then in the end, there is another one. Maybe I should try to click this thing away. Another thing is documents. You can actually use this system to create a document out of it, which is a data management plan. The data management plan to submit to a funder. But you have seen that the questions from the funders are not in here. No, the questions from the funders are encoded in the system. They are in templates. So the questions of the funders are known by the system. And when you select the template for a Horizon Europe data management plan, the system goes in, looks at all your answers, and writes English text that corresponds to what the funder is asking. Now, if you submit it to Horizon Europe and Horizon Europe doesn't grant you the money, and you decide to send it somewhere else and they want another format, it takes you 2 seconds to change the format of the data management plan without changing any of your answers. And one of the so you can choose in which format you want it, not only the content, but also the format. You want it in LaTeX, you want it in Microsoft Word document, you want it in PDF. And also you can export the whole thing in JSON as a machine actionable data management plan that can be read by any other tool. And we're also working on importing information from other tools and letting it also answer questions here. So part of the information, and the Data Stewardship Wizard really helps you to choose between options, but sometimes you need a little bit more overview. So we are working in Elixir together with a large group of people in a project, an Elixir project, to work on RDM Kit. RDM Kit is a website that has a lot of overview over things that are relevant to data management. So we link between RDM Kit and Data Stewardship Wizard a lot. Because if you're doing your Data Stewardship Wizard, your planning, then sometimes you say, okay, it's nice that it helps me choose between options, but I just want an overview. What are the considerations and what are the different options that it is choosing between? And for that overview, you are being referred to pages in RDM Kit. On the other hand, some people are just looking up things in Google. They are being referred to RDM Kit. They are also referred to RDM Kit, for instance, from Horizon Europe directly. And then they have the overview, but some people say, but okay, so there are 5 options, how do I choose? And there the reverse link is also made. So those people who are in RDM Kit are being referred to the Data Stewardship Wizard to choose between the different options that it gives. So RDM Kit has, and so this is how the website looks. It has a lot of different ways of selecting what pages are relevant for you. So it has the wheel of the data lifecycle. So you can choose, okay, I'm dealing with a certain phase of my data management. This is where I need an answer. And then it will list you the pages that are relevant to that. But you can also say, I am a data steward in a role in a project. What are the things that I need to do? I'm a researcher. What are the things I need to do? There are different entry points this way. And there are lots of links out. There are also lots of links not only to the Data Stewardship Wizard, but also lots of other resources from Elixir that are pointed to. So tools that are found in bio.tools, trainings in the test portal that Elixir is building, standards, everything is being pointed at externally. So RDM Kit is really also a hub of information that is coming from elsewhere and is being maintained. The maintenance of this is done through an expert network in Elixir. And in the Netherlands, we are participating in that through the Data Stewards Interest Group from DTL. But actually, anyone can just anyone with and without a GitHub account can just help out and put their own expertise in there. That's the strength. Everybody has an expertise on some particular things and wants to learn from others. So now I want to switch to configuring a little bit, to talk you a little bit through configuring of the Data Stewardship Wizard. This is only a small part. So there is for data stewards in an institute, they get higher power in the system. They are not only allowed to fill in data management questionnaires, but they can actually configure which data questionnaires are in there. So starting from the standard, what we call the core knowledge model, the thing can be configured. A localization, as we call it, can add questions, but also remove questions if you don't find them relevant for people in your institute. You can add answers or remove answers. You can add local expertise, even the phone number of an expert that is only available for the intranet. And all of those things can be changed. You can add a whole hierarchy of questions that are specific to your institute. The same is true for discipline specific. We actually have a very small discipline specific version for the life sciences. But actually what I'm trying to tell people is if you're adding questions, are they really discipline specific? If you really think about it, many of the things that we think in first instance that are discipline specific are not. And we can really learn from each other with this. So I heard from, for instance, social scientists, they say, well, this is very colored towards the life sciences. But actually, social scientists say, well, we have a lot of qualitative data. But yeah, medical researchers have questionnaires, and they actually are very similar to the qualitative data, social sciences. So we can learn from each other how medical researchers deal with questionnaires and how social scientists deal with their qualitative data. Similarly, I've seen surprising differences between how samples from the field are being used in archaeology, where first 1 million pictures are being taken of the data item before it's lifted out of its original context. And people in biodiversity who say, hey, that's interesting, this is a butterfly, then go with the butterfly to the museum, say, do you want it? And only when it has an accession number, they start studying it. And these things are actually quite similar. You are both harvesting a sample from an environment, and we can learn from each other if we bring it to the same context. So I'm always instead of putting a question in a discipline-specific form, I'm trying to think, how could I phrase the question in such a way that it is relevant to all people who have similar problems? This actually takes time. So adding a single question really takes a lot of time. There is the system. If you make a localization, you can share it with others. So and there is a repository for these localizations, and you can share them with other people who are doing the same thing. We are also working on translation. So I said the English sentences for the data management plan are being synthesized from the answers. So it's not necessary that the planning tool actually is in English. And my dream is somebody in China who doesn't speak English being able to select the answers and answer the questions in Chinese on the screen, and then writing a data management plan in English. And that should be possible, at least for 95%. So then we're already a long way. So that's still in my dreams, but we're on our way to do that. And there are also people who are using this whole tool for things that are completely different from data management planning. So there are people who are making software management planning in there. So they throw away all the questions that we have, build this system like as if they were doing their own transformation from a Google form into a knowledge model. They do it for software management plans and also for data privacy impact assessments and DPIAs. Anything that requires expertise to fill a form, this system is actually a possibility. So it's an expert system. And this is another view of how you edit questions. It's an expert system, and you use it and you program it as an expert system, capturing the expert knowledge into what we call a knowledge model. So this is the last slide, and I'm going back to FAIR. So FAIR, the FAIR comes out of a meeting that was held in Leiden in 2014. And it took 2 years to actually write up the proceedings of that in the FAIR Principles paper in 2016. And soon after the paper came out, Cameron Nealon in the UK said, FAIR is a journey. I think that is a really good way to see things. You can't say, as some people say, data is not fair or data is fair. No, you all the time work on thinking, can I make it more fair? Who am I doing that for? Am I doing that for myself and for science as a whole? And how much effort is it? And if you're an infrastructure provider, then you also think, how can I make it even easier? If it is too difficult to satisfy F2, principle F2 from the FAIR paper, maybe we have to make some infrastructure that makes it easier to do F2. And then the balance of investment into doing it and the benefit for science actually goes into the right direction more often. So this is the FAIR journey. And it really helps if you invest into this FAIR journey early in a project. That's very important. And there, my original background comes back. I'm a chemist. I was trained as a chemist. And the first exam that I had in university as a chemist is laboratory safety. And if you failed the laboratory safety exam, you were thrown out of the practical hall, and you got to retry it until you succeeded, and then you were allowed back into the lab. Laboratory safety is very important. Now imagine that we go to a lab and we talk to the laboratory safety officer. We say, okay, how are you doing your laboratory safety planning? And this guy grabs his hair and he says, laboratory safety planning? I don't have time to do laboratory safety planning. What I do is I help these people who have glass cuts in their hands. I extinguish fires. This is my job. And I don't have time for silly things like laboratory safety planning. It's still, if we compare it to data management, what I hear often in a data lab. People are saying, where do I get the money to do data management planning? Yeah, but data management planning, make good data stewardship, it saves money. It should be obvious that you do want to prevent these problems. The only thing is we don't recognize the data fires, and we don't recognize the data glass shards that people have in their hands as a problem. We all seem to think that it's normal that if you do some data work in the evening and you go home and in the morning you try to continue, that you can't exactly reproduce what you did yesterday evening. And we all find it quite normal that we lose our own files and are then looking for them again. And where did I store this last week? And good data stewardship and good planning, making this appointment with yourself, actually solves this. They are preventable, these kind of problems, and it will save you a lot of time if you do it. So, yeah, the only thing that I can say is start recognizing the problems that are coming from not planning and start planning your own data fires, extinguishing, and start preventing data fires from now instead of extinguishing them. And use the Data Stewardship Wizard to do so.
Great. Are there any questions? We have one question online. Is the Data Stewardship Wizard free to use?
Yes, and it's free to download. It's on GitHub. Anyone can try it. What we are offering to institutes is actually that you can just email and you can try it out. You can get your own instance that you can play with as a manager. And there is also work in the works, professional hosting for the system. But if you want, you can just download Docker files and start deploying it yourself.
Does it also provide information on how to actually execute the plan? Because it's you know, if you have someone who knows nothing about data management, it's great. Like, okay, great, my plan is all green. Now what?
Yeah. I hope that actually, if you've done that, that it will be obvious to do. But yeah, you're right. So many institutes, and I know the institute here has it as well, have a body that is there to help with data stewardship. We have identified 3 different kinds of data stewards in a project in Elixir and in the National Programme for Open Science. One is the institutional data steward that is more policy related. There is the research attached data steward, often in a research project, so they are associated to research projects and research departments, and there are data stewardship people who are more associated with the IT department, that are providing the services. And I hope that these people, sometimes it's actually only one that does all 3 roles, but that they can help out the researchers to do the execution of the planning. Not only the execution, actually, they can help you also to build the plan, to do the planning. Yeah. So there are 3, and this is something that I didn't put in this presentation, but there are really 3 target audiences for this system. The first is the researcher who may need to do data stewardship themselves, but they're not an expert in this. And for them, this system really is a guidance. But data stewards can also use this. Data stewards can use this as a sort of checklist. I always say, well, you know, the best person to fly a plane is a pilot. And other people I wouldn't advise. But even a pilot uses a checklist to check whether he didn't forget anything. And I think this system can be used by a data steward also to see how to fly this plane. And the third target audience for this system are the infrastructure providers. People who are providing services, they are sometimes frustrated that they're providing a service, but they're not being found by the people that need them. And this is this list problem. But if you put your expertise at the right level of the questionnaire in there, then you are being found. So this is also a target audience that I'm really aiming for. If you have any services that you want to provide to others, you can add questions here that guide people to your services and to you. Put your own phone number in there, and they will only see that if it's relevant to their project. So you won't be called up by people for which your service is not useful.
First of all, I'm not sure if my question is out of topic, but I would like to ask that it's only related to the prospective studies to create a data management plan, but also if it's possible to do with with, for example, like systematic review that's already existing, all the data in the literature, and also can I also perform kind of data management, but the retrospective and systematic review.
So, if I understand it correctly, what you are doing, what you are proposing, is part of a project.
Yeah.
You could do planning for that kind of project. I'm not sure that all the expertise that is needed for that is in here. But if you are doing this for a first time, and you're obtaining expertise in how to do this kind of work with data, then you could encode it in here and help colleagues in the future that are doing similar work.
We have one question online. How do you envision Data Stewardship Wizard in relation with other DMP tools like DMP Online and Argos? You mentioned that it supports Horizon 2020 templates, but could it also be used in conjunction with one of those tools, and also, for instance, the DMP application?
Yeah, so I don't know what the application is, but there we can refer to other people here. We have worked in workshops together with the authors of many of the other tools, Argos, this is a Norwegian simple DMP tool, DMP Online. In the Research Data Alliance, the standard for machine actionable data management plans has been created, and we can write and read it, and other tools can also often at least read it. So at that level, it is definitely possible to answer the questions here, export it as a machine actionable data management plan, and then the JSON file, and import it in one of the other tools, such as DMP Online. Of course, not all of the questions that are in the model are encoded in a standard, in the common standard for machine actionable data management plans. So there's still a lot of work to encode all the extra knowledge in standard machine actionable JSON. In principle, we can create it always, because each question in the knowledge model gets a unique identifier, a worldwide, globally unique identifier. So we always know that it's exactly the same question being answered, but we haven't agreed on those questions with other tools for everything. So for questions on what data are you reusing and which repository you are, we made the appointment what the identifiers are, but for other things, they are not agreed, so we can't transport the information.
Maybe related to this, I haven't filled out the data management stewardship wizard, but I have filled out the fair implementation profile version of that, and I do see some overlap. How do you see these things evolve? Do you feel this is like should merge somehow, or should become part of a data management plan?
Yeah, this is something that we are really exploring. So the fair implementation profile is a set of choices that you make of standards and ways of handling your data. That is your choices for implementing the FAIR principles. So they are really starting for each FAIR principle and then asking you, how are you going to do this in your project? Or, and that is more where I see this, in your community. So really top level interoperability requires that you sit together with all people in different labs doing similar kind of research, and then agreeing on the kind of standards that you're using. And it would be very useful to encode in a FAIR implementation profile. Now, I think that if a community makes a FAIR implementation profile, it would be very useful to have that as starting answers to your data management plan. So this is the way I think we should go. And this is a functionality that is there. You can actually have something called a template, a document, not a document template, a questionnaire template, project template from your institute, where already some of the questions are being filled in. This is how we do things here. And that could be encoding some of the work that is done in a FAIR implementation profile. That's, I think, the way we should go.
Any other questions? Online, maybe someone? Let me see. And I have one last question. You mentioned the machine actionability of these answers, basically. Is it the same backend, also the graph store behind it, or what? How are these?
No, so there is a database behind it, and they managed to program this thing in Prague in a language that I don't speak, Haskell. So I've been programming in something like 35 different programming languages, and I've tried to master Haskell by reading a book, but that's not how it works for that language. So I don't know at that level what the interoperability is. The machine actionability that we're really targeting is the fact that machines understand what question it is and what answer.
Okay.
So one of the possible applications for that is if you are a university system and there are 300 plans are being written for projects and they're all going to Horizon Europe. And now you are responsible at the university for planning the data storage facilities. And you have absolutely no idea how this will develop. The idea of a machine actionable data management plan is actually that you can write a script that reads this JSON and just sum up what the needs for data storage in 2024, 2025, and 2026 will be. And then you make your purchase order. That's how things can be used. Similarly, if topics are well written out, then you can just figure out which fraction of the budget is going of the university is going to certain kinds of research or to certain parts of data stewardship. Those kind of statistics are also being supported by machine actionable data management plan.
Interesting, and also for, let's say, junior researchers who want to figure out what answer has been, what is the most prevalent answer to this question from like a Horizon 2020 grant? Is that also something that can be?
I don't say it's impossible. It's not something that I can envision, but I think that data management plans can be published and that it should be useful. There are other people who are saying, no, my data management plan is actually containing a lot of information that I want to absolutely keep secret until at least my project is finished. But there are different opinions about that. The technology of machine actionable data management plans definitely facilitates this.
Okay, well, it's good to know. Thank you, Glenn, for this very interesting.
Bye online.
Want to learn more about the open science movement and FAIR? Find our next events below.